Hi everybody, this is Todd Olthoff from toddolthoff.com coming back at you with another screencast. And this week we're going to talk about setting up your user accounts and your groups on your server. How to do that, how to get that going, and again, how to get that set up so that people can actually access your server to be able to start to use it. So if you look on the sidebar here, up at the top we have accounts, and up here we have two different sub accounts there. We have users and we have groups. So let's start with users for a second. And when you go into users, you'll notice right there immediately is your administrative account. And so this is the account that you set up initially when you installed server. And so all of your information is there. Now, down below on this screen, you have a couple of things. You have a plus there, which is the ability to add a new account. The minus allows you to delete accounts that are there. We've also got this little spin wheel here that if you click that, you have the option to edit a user, to edit access to services, to reset passwords, or to edit your global password policy overall. So what I want to do is take a look at that for a second. So what I'm going to do is edit the user, which is myself there as the administrator, just so you can see what the user screen looks like. So here's a copy of the user screen, and it's pretty simple right now. I just have a name. I can fill out information on an email address. So let me just put that in right now just so that I can update that for information on the server. You've got the ability to allow a user to administrate the server. Now what that means is that the person that you've assigned those privileges to can log into the server as if they're the administrator like you, and they have the privilege to change things on the server if they want to. So they have access to all the controls and things on the back end and can make changes. Now my suggestion is that you limit that as much as possible. Make it yourself, maybe one other person that you trust to do it. Again, it's a home server, so the odds that you got somebody in there that's technical enough to do it or somebody that you actually want to do it probably means it's going to be you and you only. But I would use that sparingly because they have complete access to the server. You'll notice down below we've got an area where we can add groups as well. And I'm going to click the plus there because there is one group that's automatically set up with your server, and that's your work group. So let me just click that for a second. And I can add in, if I click that, I can add in any kind of group that I want to get started. Let me do this. Let me make it a little easier on us. Let me cancel this function. And let me just go through the rest of the steps of it so you can see what this area looks like. And what we're gonna do is just add somebody. Now, see where it says, first, let me see where it says edit access to services? Let me just click that for a second. Now, what this does is it gives a very simple visual interface that shows you what services a particular individual has access to on your server. So, for instance, things like address book, which we'll talk about later, file sharing, where I'm able to access different shared folders and drives and things like that on my server. iCal server, which allows me to sync with a centralized server calendar. We'll talk about how to set that up. iChat server, where you have the ability to set up a chat with everybody in your house. Mail server, if you're doing mail. Podcast, if you're making podcasts. Profile manager. Time Machine, which is the backups that happens, and I'll show you later how to set up a centralized backup. And then VPN, where I'm able to log into the server remotely as if I'm in the local network. All of these things it shows as the administrator I have access to. Now the cool part is you could come in here and if you wanted to, you could say, hey, there's certain people in my house that I don't want to have access to certain services. Like I don't want them to have access to file sharing. So if I uncheck that and I click OK, the server will then go and say, okay, for this particular person, no access to file sharing. And so what's kind of neat is you can turn on and off services just right from here. I'm going to click cancel and just leave it alone since that's my administrator account. But I thought it's kind of a neat thing to show you that you can make that happen. You can reset a password if you want. You click this button, you put in the new password, you verify it, and bam, it's done. It's changed. Beauty of this is you don't have to remember the old password. So if you actually forget it, and someone forgets their password in your family, happens when you have kids, and they forget it, you don't have to remember what their old one was to get access to change it. You can just go in here and change it all by yourself, and as soon as you do that and click change password, the password's changed and everything's good. They can log in with that new password. So those are a few of the things, just basic things that you can do on the user account. So let's just set up a new user for a second just to get the feel for it. So I'm going to just set up, John Doe here. All right, so we're going to set up John Doe, and now it has an account name. Now what that is that's a shortened name, kind of a username, that people can use also to log into the server. So they can log into your server with their full name, or they can log into it with their short name. So like if I wanted to, I could leave it as John Doe, or if I wanted to do it, I could say J Doe like this, and then maybe everybody in your family has their first initial last name. Or you could do, just if you want to do first name, last initial, John D. Whatever you want to do, you can set that up, and that's going to allow him to log in with that. Email address, so we're going to say John at, we'll just put my server, put my domain on there. Password, so you create a password for John, and it's probably a good idea to ask John what he wants as a password so that he remembers it. And then again, here's where I can allow him to have administrative services or not. And like I said, I would leave that off because I don't want John accessing my server and making any changes. So I click Done, and now it goes and it creates this account for John. Now, there's something I want to show you here that's a distinction that's important to understand about our user accounts as well as our group accounts. You'll notice next to John there's a little globe there, right? And you'll notice next to my account there is no globe. Let me explain the difference between those two. My account, this administrator account, when I set it up as a local account, right? I didn't have an Open Directory master set up. We just did that in the last screencast when we talked about Profile Manager. So I didn't have that set up. But now I do have an Open Directory master, so that now anytime I create users or groups, those user or groups are going to show this little globe showing, hey, these accounts are on an Open Directory master. Therefore, these guys have access to any of those services that relate to Open Directory master, which means, again, their managed computers and devices and things like that on Profile Manager are there. So that's the distinction between those two, just so you know what's there. And that means that, again, there's some outside access with these things internet-wise. So as you're setting up these different accounts, you'll notice all of a sudden there's a globe there. If you had set up your accounts before we had created the Open Directory master, they would only be local accounts. So they wouldn't be able to take advantage of Profile Manager, which is why I set up Profile Manager first, just so that all those services were taken care of, so that when I added users, they automatically would fall under that Open Directory master because I knew I wanted to use Profile Manager. If you have had no desire to use Profile Manager and you've skipped over that and you've come to this particular tutorial, that's great. You won't see a globe there because you didn't set that up. That's okay. As a matter of fact, you probably came in when you started setting this up and it just set up a network directory for you so that you had access to directory services. But I just wanted to let you know that if you don't see that there, you know why it's not there. If you have it there, you know it was because of what we did before. So now we've got John set up and we've got myself set up, and I'm the administrator. And you can add a picture for John and all that kind of stuff. And you'll notice if I click here to edit John, what I just want to show you is you'll notice here's John's full name, and then here is the shortened username that we set up, John D. So it shows up right there so that John can use that or that to log into the server. Now, you'll notice right away under groups it says he's a part of workgroup, right? And you'll notice that it has a little globe next to workgroup. Workgroup is just a basic group that everybody is a part of. And so let me take you over for a second to the groups so that you can get an understanding of why we have groups and how we use them. So let me just come over here to groups, and you'll see we have the workgroup already set up. And we have the same kinds of things. I can add a group, I can delete a group, or I can edit a group. And it's got a little pencil there. If I click edit, what you'll see on here is when you set up a group, you've got work group is the name, you've got the shortened name, which just happens to be the same, it's just lowercase. But we can change that name here, right, where it says full name. We can make it say something different if we want. Now, there are group services that automatically get set up. So you'll notice it says give this group a shared folder. And so it has a checkbox there, and when we go to file sharing, you'll see that it has that stuff set up. If I just click this checkbox here, I can actually pick my own folder, but I wanted to show you in the Finder that it takes us to a groups area on my particular computer, and it has a workgroup folder that's set up, so that way anybody in the workgroup has access to this folder remotely. And they can put stuff in it, and they can take stuff out depending on the permissions that we have set up. But I just wanted to show you that it has a spot right on your server where it sets that up for you ahead of time so that the work group's ready to go. I can also make the group members iChat buddies so that they're buddies together. They automatically are in a group, and so when they sign on to their chat, their friends and stuff will come up. And I'll talk about creating a group wiki in a minute. We haven't set up the wiki, so that's why that's grayed out, but there's the ability to do that as well. And then you can see under here the members of the group is John Doe and any other local accounts, right? Now, local accounts would have been myself. I believe if I click this plus button here, you can add other users onto this. That will then allow you to just continue just adding people to this particular group. Now, the reason we have groups is because groups make it a lot easier to manage things. For instance, if I had a situation where I have my kids, and I want to just set up a profile for the kids once. I don't want to have to set it up for each individual kid. I got 3 kids. That would just be kind of a pain in the neck to have to repeat it over and over again. So what I can do instead is I can come in here, I can add a plus, and I can set up a group that says kids group. All right, so that way I know it's a kids group. And if I want to shorten the name, I can just make it say kids. And I'm going to set up this new group called kids group. So it's now set it up. You can see it's got the globe by it. So it's on our Open Directory Master. Now if I go in to edit it, right, I can go in to edit this and I can say, you know what, I want the kids to have a shared folder. I don't want to mess them with anything else, but I want them to have one folder that they can share between each other so that they can exchange information. I also want to make them iChat buddies because they like to chat across the system. So I'm going to say done to this. I have no members yet because I haven't added any kids. All right, but let's just assume that I had. So now what happens is I have all the kids added into this group so that when I go now to set up different profiles, I can set up profiles, and as you'll see later in Profile Manager, that say, hey, anybody in the kids group has access to these particular services. So I don't want them to be able to get onto certain websites. I don't want them to be able to have access to YouTube or something, for instance. And I can set all of that up and then push all of that to all of the kids' accounts so that when they log in, all of those restrictions and things are in place. So it's a really neat system to be able to manage the different groups of people you got without having to go through and do it individually on an individual basis. So it really does make it kind of a neat way to manage access and those kinds of things for the people in your household. But now the great thing is we've got our server set up. Everything's ready to go. I've got my group set up and I've got my users set up. And what I'll show you later when we go into talking about things like file sharing is I'll talk about how you can set up your users to have their home accounts actually on your server. So that's all I have today on our screencast. We talked today about the accounts, users, and groups. Next time I'll come back at you with another screencast to help you learn how to do more things with your Mac.